All right, so let me bust out the Logic Cam over here, which is necessary. All right, my people, there you go. So we're going to be mainly working on the mixer today. We've written out our MIDI drums. We're going to do a multi-out, which will be this button down here. And then from there, we can actually split out our kick, snares, all the toms, room, and overhead. So right now, the drums by themselves sound like, which is not bad. I mean, it's a decent sounding drum kit. You know, like if you wanted to put a rock track out and you didn't want to go like too crazy in the production, that would work. You know, just basic compression and a little bit of limiting and stuff, and it'll work. But we want to go over the top because we're doing a modern metal track. So I'm going to show you guys how to achieve that sound. Have all of these kick, snare, and all the toms. They're routed to a bus over here that just says drums. So this is every single drum. And I have the room and the overhead routed separately. They're over here on their own bus, and then from there, they're routed into the drum bus. So what we're going to start with the overall, because I like to approach things at like a top-down kind of way of mixing stuff. So we're going to stop from the drum bus itself, and then we're going to work our way down to the individual instruments. First, off the rip, we're going to start with compression. Now, my preferred method of compression for a drum normally is using something like a distressor on the individual drums themselves, but I think for this, we're going to be using the FG. We're going to add an EQ to it. It's a Neve, but whatever, close enough. And then we're going to be adding a little bit of saturation to it. And for that, we use, here we go, the Revival. So these are the 3 standard plugins. And in every instrument that I mix, you're going to be seeing the same things being used over and over again, because I literally start with compression, EQ, saturation. Now, there's different extremes of it, obviously, but this is pretty much the basic starting point. So I'm going to start with taking off these 2 plugins, and we're just going to work on the compressor right now. Trying the different circuits to see how it sounds. It's a little bit of saturation, so it's not too crazy. Let me raise the volume in my headphones. It's a bit too much compression. I'm just trying to hit like 1. There we go. I just want a little bit of pumping to kind of keep it together as I keep mixing it. Well, when it comes to the EQ, let's turn that on. All we're going to really boost is it's already there, preset 3.2. I'm just going to raise this a little bit just to give the snare a little bit more snap and the kick drum a bit more like snappiness. You don't want to push it too far. It just sounds weird. But just there. There it sounds a little dull. That brings it some life. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add some saturation. Now, the cool thing about this one is that this one does 2 separate parameters of saturation. So it does the shimmer, which is like the top end, and it does the thickness, which is the low end. But we're just going to like raise it until it kind of makes sense in our ears to smooth out that top end a little bit. I got to lower the gain over here. Let's see some. I kind of like it there. That's for the snare drum. Now you can see I'm kind of pinning it really hard. I don't necessarily care about pinning things to the point where it's like it sounds like it's almost too much. That's kind of like where I find my sound, and we're just going to keep hitting that harder. So this is what it sounds like without the plugins. With the plugins. Listen, some people get like really overcomplicated with MIDI drums. They're not that complicated. They already sound good off the bat. You bought them for a reason. You don't have to do too much. It's not like sitting there and trying to like, you know, EQ and gate and compress a natural drum kit. That takes a lot more work. With MIDI drums, they're already recorded in the right atmosphere. They have the right microphones in the right room, played the right way, so you don't got to worry about too much. So we're not trying to like completely change the sound of our drums. If you wanted that, then you're probably just using the wrong library. What we're trying to do is just enhance what's already there. So it kind of makes more sense in the context of a modern mix. And there's gonna be little things that I'm gonna throw over here that you guys might have not seen before, because it's a lot of things that some guys kind of keep to themselves, but I don't care. I'm going to share it with you guys. So that's what we're here for. So I'm going to start with the kick. So again, virtual mix rack, but this is pretty much what we're going to be using for the kick drum. Just 2 plugins, and we have a few other ones that we're going to add a little bit later on, but this is what we're going to work with for right now. So the first thing we're going to start with is compression. I like to use a distressor for this, just because it could really pump really hard, and I really like using the high pass, so it doesn't detect the low end. It just kind of pumps the high end. It just kind of smooths everything out. It's really cool. But this is what we're going to use, distressor. It's aggressive, it's fast. You could kind of use an 1176 if you wanted to. A lot of DAWs don't come with like a distressor-based plugin, so you got to buy it. UA has a really good one, but to be honest with you, for the price of the membership, you might as well just go with the Slate one, because you have that and you have everything else to work with. I'm going to set it to like a 4-to-1. It's already slamming. Also, if you go back and you watch my compression video, it'll actually show you how to use one of these compressors. I want to keep that blooming. Right there. Yeah, we're going like 9 dB, so we're slamming it pretty hard, but that's good. Let's mess around with these high pass filters. See? Now I feel like I can slam it harder. I like that. I like that there. So I like that there. Pretty much we're just trying to enhance the smack on it without messing around too much with the low end. This is just my preference on the way that I like to mix a kick drum, because I like the air that's underneath like the base of the kick drum, but I just don't necessarily want it like compressed all the time. Here we go. So now we're gonna work on the low end. We're gonna boost up a little bit of like the lows, like 90 around that area, just give it more of a chest hit. So we're gonna pretty much be using this down here. Now, as I mix the song, if I think the kick drum has like too much snap, I personally don't really like really snappy kick drums. I will actually go into here and I will negate what we did on the master bus, which was that 3.2K. I'll bring that down to like kind of control the snap a little bit, but it's just drums by themselves right now. This is kind of what we have to work with, right? Make this a bell. Let's go to like 90 hertz. It helps if I turn it on. I like really boomy kick drums, so that's around smooth. That might even be a little too conservative for what I like, but for now, because it's just the kick drum, I think that sounds pretty good. Now we're going to move over to our saturation stage. So for saturation, so I'm going to use the saturator for this one because I think the saturator kind of works better. So I could hear it like already kind of like breaking up. I mean, we are kind of gaining volume by doing it, but it is sounding bigger as we go. And now we're going to throw a limiter on there. We're going to be shaving off the transient of the kick drum. So what that's going to allow us to do is that it's going to allow us more control without being too audible, unless you go like really extreme, and I'll show you an example of that. But really what it does is that it helps you like cut the transient off that our ears kind of don't really like pick up. So you could save yourself on volume, because even though we don't hear it, the compressor that's on the master will hear it. So this kind of like saves you a little bit more. It gives you more headroom, and it allows you to make the track louder because you're clipping a clipper that top portion of the transient of the instrument. So you guys can see the peaks. These are the peaks of the kick drum. And what we're going to do is that we're going to just bring this down to the point where it's like we're just taking a little bit off the top. There you go. And all we managed to do was just like take that little piece of like the little shaving top end off, and that we already saved ourselves like almost half a dB of room. And as you can tell, the transient, the little snap at the top of the kick drum kind of came down a little bit as we tucked it in, so it kind of smoothed it out. Now if you go extreme, that's when you start cutting into like the body of the drum. You don't want that. So, and just like that, we have a kick drum mix. We're gonna throw in, actually before our limiter, we should be throwing in our low control. I think for a rock track like this, 50 would work better. There's not much stuff in the way of the low end. All right, so let me bring low control a little bit more down. Just a little bit. All I'm trying to do is like bring up like that low end that's like, if you guys don't have headphones, you guys won't be able to hear it, but like that low end that's like, that makes the speakers thump. We're going to go to the snare. I spend hours on snares, but I'm going to give you guys like the quick run through of how I mix them. So we're going to throw on our virtual mix rack. I have these stuff like templated out, so I sometimes don't remember what I do. So pretty much our goal with the snare is to give it more crack on the top end, and then we're going to put a sample under it to kind of enhance the room a little bit. Right now, this is what our snare sounds like by itself. Let's say we don't have the rooms or the overhead. Yeah. But you can see like the rooms really gives it like that bigger than life snare sound. We're going to enhance that later on, but we're going to mess around with just the crack right now. I'm going to show you a cool way that I use distortion on the snare too. So let's go 4-to-1. Shit sounds so punchy. Chris Brown is shaking. That's right. Kind of like it there. I'm just trying to like get like right. I'm trying to just compress like right after the stick hit and the release. It's really exaggerated. I kind of like it there. I like it when the snare has like that splack sound. All right, so now we're going to pop up a little bit of the, you know what, I'm not going to do this for it. I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to compress into it, and that's good enough for this track here. But we're going to use a decapitator. There's this one preset in it that does this really cool thing with snares, and I kind of discovered this by mistake. But so it's, if you go to like drums, you go to like snare accent. What it'll do, it'll actually like kind of mimic a drum room, but with distortion. So I'll just play it for you so you guys can hear. So this is without it. Snare drum. We're focused on the snare. This is with it. And that's really cool because Decapitator has this awesome thing that it's called tone. So you could make it like really dark, so it makes the snare kind of sound fatter. I'm going to mess around a little bit with the drive because it's a little too much. But right now we're just going to put it at 100 and we're going to hear it out and see how it sounds. I'll bring that back a little more. Kind of like right there. Without it, you hear like that, oh, behind the snare drum. That's the sound that I love. I love that sound. And with Decapitator, you could just do it with that one plugin. There's different ways you can do it. Like you could grab like a separate distortion and like put a high pass and low pass and like really, it takes like maybe 2 or 3 different plugins to do the same thing that Decapitator does with just one. Now we're just going to throw a limiter on there. A lot of people get into like complicated mixing about toms. Toms aren't that complicated to mix. To be honest with you, most of the time, I don't do anything with toms. I just leave them in the mix and they're the last things that I touch and I just duck them where they belong and that's it. At worst case scenario, I'll put them all into like one bus and I might put like a compressor on it just to limit it. But that's like very rare. I almost never touch toms. All right, so now we're going to go into mixing the overhead because like I said, the room is just a snare room. There's nothing else on there. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. A little bit of Decapitator. So what we're going to do with these is that, one, we don't want to oversaturate it. You can't distinctly tell what cymbal is what, so we don't want to oversaturate it. And this is how we kind of do that. So I add a little bit of Decapitator. It gives it like more sustain, you know? So the ones that work. Kind of spit that out already. And like be aware, like this does add volume. And then the next thing I do, I just put a limiter on it. That's it. Now with the rooms, with the overheads, I do get a little bit harder on it, so I do want to see a bit more red in it, just because I want it to be kind of like just a line, just a little bit to like to the point where you still hear like the cymbal separation, but enough where it's like control. So the room itself, this is what it sounds like, and it's weird because like GGD has this thing where there's like a ride cymbal in the room. It's really weird. You hear that, like that ride cymbal that's in the room? Whatever, it works. I just say, yeah, listen, Nolly, I don't know how you did this. I don't know if you did that on purpose, but it works. You just hear it like, it's like a gong. But it kind of makes the snare room sound longer, so I don't know. Maybe it was done on purpose. I'm not sure. We're going to throw a virtual mix rack on there. So we're just going to compress the drum room. Let's throw a 4-to-1. I want to compress this hard. You're starting to hear that cymbal in the background. And let's bring down the volume on it. And that's it. So I leave this room from GGD as like my main room that plays throughout the whole track, but there's going to be another room we're going to add to right now that's going to be like an exaggerated version of that snare. And what it's going to do is like, it's really going to throw the snare off left and right. So when the chorus hits, there's a breakdown, certain parts that kind of need some impact. We're going to automate that snare room to come in so those parts sound bigger. So this is what we're going to do. So we're going to add a bus. We're going to go to 4 just because it's empty. Let's raise that output, and then we're going to go to bus 4 over here. Is this bus over here? We're going to name this snare sample, but we're going to add slate trigger. Now, if you don't have slate trigger, you could do this manually, I guess. Or the other cool way you can do it is that with that distortion trick that I did on the snare with the decapitator, you can do that on a drum room and you'll have like that elongated, huge sounding drum room. Or you could use some reverb. A lot of guys just use reverb because it already throws it. But I like using more of like something that sounds like a snare than a reverb. So we're going to go here. We're going to add, where's slate trigger 2? Here we go. So this is a slate trigger. You guys have probably seen this plugin before if you've done any amount of mixing, but essentially all this does is that you run a snare or you run a kick drum or a tom or whatever kind of hit you want through it, and it'll replace that hit with whatever you want it to be. So you kind of hear like that double hit on the snare. So I'm going to roll back this over here, which is the attack, and it's going to draw the sample back to before the stick hits. So you're going to hear a double transient. I kind of really want to use this one for some reason. I am a slave to the snare, so I like huge sounding snare sound. So I use a lot of like little drum rooms and stuff. And then in the context of the mix, and that's what we got so far. So I think that was a good educational video on how to mix MIDI drums.